Turning to Michael O'Hanlon now, Senior Fellow in Foreign Policy at the Brookings Institution, a nonprofit public policy organization. Michael specializes in U.S. defense strategy, and he just co-wrote a column, How Do We Prevent ISIS 2.0? Withdrawing from Syria is not the answer. Michael, to begin with, thank you, but when we did this a year ago, 59 Tomahawk missiles at an airfield, did that have any effect on the conflict?
Hi, Shepard. Well, no, it did not in any way that I can detect, except maybe in, second and third order details that are hard to measure. It probably did eliminate 15 to 20% of the Syrian Air Force. I think it destroyed 15 to 20% of the Syrian Air Force. But Assad still has enough airplanes and enough artillery to bombard neighborhoods. And it may have slowed him down a little, but of course he has some Russian help. And even more so, he has Iranian and Hezbollah help on the ground. So on balance, since that time, he has continued to win the war. We've also seen, as you know, a sort of a second war going on in the east, where our allies, the Syrian Democratic Front, mostly the Kurds from the north of the country, have, on the ground, with our air power support, defeated much of ISIS's presence in the east. ISIS is not completely eliminated by any means, and there's also still al-Qaeda presence or related presence up in the northwest. But that's the other major development. That had nothing to do with the airstrikes that we undertook against the Syrian Air Force. So on balance, Assad has probably had a good year, even after what we did to him. And that raises questions as to what we can really do now. Well,
that's what I was about to ask. If you're the United States, potentially in concert with the French and the British, what might cause Assad to stop gassing his own people?
Well, I wouldn't object to another punitive airstrike that took out some of his planes, but I hope the bigger message here for President Trump, who, as we know, would like to get out of Syria, and wouldn't we all at some level, I hope the broader message here is that President Trump can realize that if he leaves Syria and leaves our allies behind, that's going to be a victory for Iran, for Hezbollah, and perhaps someday for ISIS 2.0 and for President Assad. The bad guys are going to be the ones that move in to the space that we've essentially forced our allies to vacate. And so I hope this will not so much necessarily produce a one-time, one-off punitive response, but actually lead to a change in U.S. strategy in which we settle in for the long haul. And it's going to take a while to figure out a way to marginalize Assad, but in the short term, we should not give him back any of the land that he does not control today, where our allies have their strongholds.
Michael, some breaking news. We've just confirmed, our team at the Pentagon has just confirmed through a U.S. official, Israel did give the United States a heads up about an airstrike in Syria last night in advance, and the Israelis did strike inside Syria. Fox News now confirms. Michael, though that's not a headline many days, it's a recurring reality that the Israelis are striking in Syria is not out of the ordinary.
You're right, and it's a whole new dimension of the war compared to a year or two ago. A year or two ago, the Israeli strikes, when they happened, were spaced by many months, very much one-off things. Israel's really nervous about Iran, and I can understand why. Iran's ability to ship arms into Lebanon to Hezbollah, from which point they could be used against Israel in various kinds of barrages of the type we've seen in the past. This is one reason why I just don't think the United States has the luxury of pulling out. We're not going to have any way to achieve a victory. We're not going to be able to have a resounding success.
There is no victory.
There are different shades of gray that go from mediocre to bad to worse. And it matters where you wind up in those shades of gray for the security of Israel, for the security of Jordan, for the defeat of ISIS, for the weakening of Iran.
The Russians and the Iranians have clearly put a lot into this. They've taken a lot of risks of escalation and beyond. Why is this particular conflict, this area, so important to those two?
Well, it's moderately important to Russia. I don't know that it's crucial, but it does, for Russia, allow it to play a geostrategic role. They have bases still in Syria, which is their only real military outpost in the broader Middle East. As you know, in the Cold War, the Soviet Union was involved in the Middle East. After the Cold War ended, Russia sort of pulled back. Putin sees this as an opportunity for Russia to again be a great power on the world stage, and he sees it as a chance to correct American, hyperpower misbehavior. That's how he sees a lot of what we've done in Iraq and Libya and elsewhere. He doesn't think we've used our power very well, and he wants to check it to some extent. So I think those are the Russian interests.
Michael O'Hanlon from Brookings. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Shepard.